Welcome to Rock Your Code Quality. This is the second time I've done this talk. I did this I spoke in June at Denver Dev Days, and they asked me to do a keynote. So I did my very first keynote ever, and they asked me to do it on code quality. So this is a super stripped down version of that talk. Based on me not getting through all my slides yesterday, I cut even more out today, so to try to get it in 45 minutes. So if you didn't catch everything, just email me on cards, and I'll send you the deck, okay? I'm David McCarter. I'm a Microsoft MVP, award-winning developer, blah, blah, blah. There's where you can get my books, my swag. There's all my email handles and all that kind of stuff. That'll be at the end, too. So if you want to email me, or you can get a card. I want to thank Grape City for sending me here. I love speaking, but you guys aren't really worth $600 of travel costs. So ever since my first time speaking here, I've always had somebody sponsor my trip, so I don't have to pay. Because otherwise I wouldn't be here. Because I live in San Diego, and it's like $600 for me to come up here. I do a in-session survey. If you want to text that code to that phone number, I'll be giving it will pick winners of 2 winners at the end, and one of the winners I'll give away the same thing they were giving away at Grape City. So any one of their software packages for free, which ranges from $6 to $1,000. So text RCNA to that number, and you'll be in the thing for winning it, okay? And this will come up a bunch of other times if you don't get it right this second. So what we're going to do, opening act. Opening act is always why I'm doing this talk. Why do we need code quality? How do we implement it easily? Foo stuff I can't do. There's no way I have time for that. So, and then encore, okay? So, opening act. That's one of the bands I do photography for. Come on. So, this is what Wikipedia defines as code quality. You may read it if you want. It's kind of long, but really what I'm going to be talking about is how code quality affects the business context, meaning business, because that's what I write. I write business apps. I don't write games. I don't write things like that. My jobs are always business apps, and I just started a new contract on Monday for this company in San Diego. So this is what we're going to be talking about, is how software code quality or software quality is how you do it for your business software. But most everything I talk about can be applied to anything, but I want to get you on the same page as I am. And we're going to be talking about software functional and structural quality, a lot of things. So I basically took the definition of software quality on Wikipedia and made a whole talk out of it, okay, and applied it to .NET. So if you came here to see a lot of code, I think I only have one slide. So this is really just a lot of talking, okay, and hopefully inspiring you to do better in your work. So when it revolves around this means reliability, efficiency, maintainability, security. Oh, it screwed up again. Size. I hate PowerPoint templates. So we're going to be talking most of these things we're going to be talking about today. Not size, pretty much, but the other ones for sure. So, why do we need code quality? I would let you watch the whole thing, but we don't have time.
Under the hood. Most critical software you use every day contains a terrifying number of hacks and shortcuts that happen to barely fit together into a working whole. It would be like taking apart a brand new 747 and discovering that the fuel line is held in place by a coat hanger and the landing gear is attached with duct tape.
How many people feel like this with the software they write and or use? Really? Not everybody? So I don't know how old this quote is by this guy. So I actually found a quote that I really like from one of the people I actually was lucky enough to have dinner with once. He's the king of UI, Alan Cooper. And this is what he said this year. There's no such thing as a large-scale development project. All software is small chunks stuck together with chewing gum and string. Now how many people feel like that? Yeah. I see this more, now that I'm consulting, I see the worst code I've ever seen in my life. Because usually when I'm full-time, I have a say in what's happening. But in consulting, I don't. So when they hire me and I look at their code, I go, oh, man. Like my new contract this week, all this week, I just worked on disposed memory issues. And I'm not done. After a week. Yeah. So. One of those days, things don't like to work right. So when I was preparing for this talk for Denver, I asked people on Twitter, I go, because I know what code quality means to me, but I was interested in what it means to other people. So I did a Twitter thing, and this is what came back, and I really like all these. I'm not showing you the slide on the bad things people said because of time, but I'm just going to show you the positive things, which I do agree with every one of them. Sorry, PowerPoint just can't handle my slides. Clarity, yes, definitely readability. Stable. My last job, I refused to have production rights because I didn't want to push any code because I didn't believe it would work. So I made my bosses do it. I did not want it because I didn't want to be responsible because they had 0 unit tests. And so I said, nope, I don't want to push it. You can. Simple. Yes, code should be simple. I'll be talking about that in a little bit. Undervalued. Code quality is immensely undervalued in most of what I see. Maintainability. I don't know why my video's screwing up. Reliability. Tested. And then, of course, someone said solid principles. So I like all these. And all of these are very important for you to think of as you're architecting or coding your apps. Oh, those ones, I hate you, PowerPoint, really. So anyway, so these are supposed to come up one by one, but when I saved it, I guess it screwed up. So anyway, this is a real in-production app for a company that I just stopped working for, a big company in San Diego. This is the solution I was working on at that company. Had 49,463 warnings, which if you do what I said in my talk yesterday, and you should go in all your projects and say, turn warnings as errors. So they really have over 50,000 errors in one code base, in one solution. 30 critical errors, 162 critical warnings. And if you go to your boss with these kind of analytics and say, hey, we need to fix 50,000 errors, do you think he's going to let you do it? He or she going to let you do it? No. That doesn't sell product. Features do. Feature, feature, feature. Ship it. Okay. On top of that, They had 6,000 globalization issues, which we'll be talking about in a little bit, 2,000 spelling issues, because we all know we can't spell, right? What's the trait of an awesome programmer? You can't spell, you have dyslexia, and ADD. If you have those three things, you will be an awesome programmer, just like me and Sarah. Hey, Sarah. She tried to sneak in, I didn't let her. Yes. So, this is what I call my manager slide, because none of this stuff is going to get better unless you convince your manager, okay? Because basically what I found in most companies is everybody above my level doesn't care a shit about code quality. They care about shipping and features and getting their bonuses, right? It's us that have to care about it. It's us that have to be the squeaky wheel, or it's not going to happen. And I've been let go of companies because I was the squeaky wheel. And that's okay with me, because I don't want to work there if they're going to do that stuff, okay? So some famous guy did this that I'd like to show. So this is the real cost of fixing bugs. In the requirements phase, if you find a problem in requirements, it's no cost to fix. And you can see here, by the time you get to coding, it's already 10 times the cost to fix something that wasn't caught in the other two phases, okay? 10 times, okay? Now let's talk about releasing it. 150 times the cost to fix a bug than if you fixed it here. Because if you think about it, depending how big your company is, of all the stuff that has to happen if the user finds a bug. Has to go through tech support, has to be assigned, has to go through triage, has to be assigned to a developer, has to be unit tested, have to go back to QA, have to go back to user acceptance testing, and then released. That's a lot of money, okay? Then if you just fixed it there, or even here, would be better. But if a user finds it, very expensive for a company, okay? So if you just practice what I'm preaching in this talk, you're going to make that a heck of a lot better, okay? Like one time, one of my recent jobs, I saw the error come through that someone, null reference exception, you know? So some programmer in my team wasn't checking for null. And I hit my head, I was on my desk, and I hit my head, and I go, my students at UCSD know better than this. And a developer here did it? And part of the reason was, when I started the company, we had 0 lines of code, zero unit tests for over 1 million lines of code, and when I left 4.5 years later, we had 0 unit tests. I tried to get them to unit testing, but they pulled it out of every schedule. So print that, staple it to your manager's door so he can see it every day he walks in, okay? So how do we implement code quality easily? Because I like to do things the easy way. I don't like to, that code base I showed you all the errors, they had a violation every 5.2 lines of code. Just so you make sure you know. All right, oh, there's my flying Mongo ship. See, that's what I do when I'm bored. Watching Netflix. I'm bored all the time. Is that what somebody said? No, mostly. So, coding standards and practices. How many people here have coding standards at their company written down? Not in people's head. Oh, I saw hands go down. Written. Easily accessible. Now raise your hands again. I couldn't get it because you guys kept going up and down. So like a third of you. Okay, then you all need a copy of my book. But which I sold the last one this morning, but you can get online. But you need to have coding standards. It's really, really important, right? Whether you use my book, at the job I told you about previously, every developer got a copy of my book. That was the coding standards for our team. Even if you worked in India or whatever country, you got a copy of my book, okay? Is that what we made people adhere to? And it's super important if you hire contractors like me. Well, not me, because I'm the coding standards king. But if you hire contractors, they don't care. They're gone in 3 or 6 months. They just write whatever they want and say, see ya. So it's really super important to have this written down and enforce it, okay? It's one thing to have coding standards, another thing to enforce it, okay? And enforcing is not, I don't want to sound like you're the policeman or something like that, but it's a really great way to teach programmers a better way of doing things, especially your beginners. Because if you just let your beginners do whatever they want, they're never going to learn properly, okay? So you need coding standards, yeah. It is, yes. And I'm in my 5th edition. It's been out, what, 12 years now, I think? So architectural and multi-layer design. The next slide, this one, I'm going to show you, come on, is the diagram I show my beginner students at UCSD in the first week, because I want to set them up that this is how you properly architect applications, and for the next 6 weeks, I'm going to teach you how to do that, okay? And so I start them off with my way of doing architecture, which is pretty standard. And when I show this, I want to preface it with, it won't fit for everyone, but you need to start off somewhere and change it on purpose, not because you're lazy or some other reason, right? So all apps, of course, need a data layer in Microsoft land. You know, it's SQL Server or SQL Azure. I only use any framework code first now. Ever since it came out, I've never looked back because I really like it. So for whatever data layer you have to have a data layer, okay? It's a separate layer from everything else. All these are separate, completely separate layers. Then you have your business layer, which can include workflow, business components, web jobs, like you guys are using that app, right? Texting to that phone number right now. That's an Azure web job. It's running in Azure right now. And I actually made a talk out how I architected that app with this in Azure. I did it for the first time last year here. On top of that, of course, you have to have your communications layer, which seems to change almost every other month. And so we have everything from WCF to Azure App Services, WCF Workflow, App Services, lots of things, a way to communicate. You got to get your data out somehow, right, from these layers, right? Even if it's internal, like the new company I'm working with, they're still using WCF because they do all their internal calls through TCP and all their external calls through HTTP. So, because internal should not go through HTTP, it should go through TCP or some faster method. So that's communications. We have to get it out, especially in the mobile world. It's super important for that layer to be done right. And this is actually what I'm working on in my new job. They have a whole separate team for the UI, which I'm really happy about. I don't have to do it. Because look at UI now. We have Windows Forms, which are making a comeback soon, WPF, ASP.NET Core, UWP, Windows Store, SharePoint, VSTO, reporting, and your presentation layer. And so we call that the user experience layer, okay? And something I'll be talking about later, caching is done now with SQLite for Windows Phone on mobile devices. That runs on any platform, okay? Very small footprint, runs anywhere, okay? Even on phones. So that's what I teach my students. And this is even that app you're using right now, which you say, oh, it's a pretty simple app. Yes, it is. But I still applied the same exact architecture to it, okay? So let's move on. Oh, then you have identity over here, which, of course, you need to have for most apps. And of course, all this can live in Azure, all of it, right? All of that app you're using right now is in Azure. Nothing runs local here on anything. It's all in Azure, which I really like Azure. So object-oriented programming, I'm kind of going to blow through this a little bit because I talked a lot about it yesterday. Who was in my talk yesterday? One person. Okay. So sorry, some of this is a little bit of a repeat. The other thing I see people not do correctly, which I talked in depth yesterday, is they don't do object-oriented programming correctly, which I've learned through 20 plus years of programming is really the best structured way of doing things most of the time, okay? Because I've seen projects fail a lot, and usually it's because they're not using proper object-oriented techniques. And I tell people, even my students, that if you don't use these three principles, you will build a house of cards, and it will fall, okay? Someday, it will. So, inheritance, polymorphism, encapsulation. As I said yesterday, if you guys just did encapsulation correctly, I would be the happiest speaker ever. But you don't, okay? Based on the code I've seen. Send me your code base. I'll prove it to you. I see even less inheritance, and I rarely see polymorphism, okay? So, why? Because your manager doesn't care about this. They care about shipping it, okay? But you should care about this, okay? So, I talked a lot about it yesterday, and you can, oh, I forgot to plug my videos online. So I have some videos online. You can buy it from me here, which talks about this way more in depth. I wish my clicker worked. You got a clicker back there, Sarah? Okay, I'll let you find it. So, I talked about this yesterday. Code contracts doesn't work in .NET Core, so I've kind of abandoned it. And I used to do talks on code contracts. Thanks. Oh, okay. I'm doing it. Why don't devices play well together? Really, I'm just going to plug in directly. It's this thing. Here, I can have this back. This damn USB hub I bought. So, I talked about this yesterday. So, to help you do encapsulation better, I kind of took some of the design of code contracts and I created a class for you to use that operates sort of kind of like code contracts, okay? So basically what this does is it takes 2 or 3, 4 lines of code and does it in 1 line of code, which is one of the reasons I really like code contracts, okay? So it's in my open source project. I have a whole article I wrote for C# Corner about this. You can go check it out. And it's called Try Validate Param. And it's super overloaded. There's an overload that takes collections, strings, objects, GUIDs, enums, a bunch of other ones. And all you do is say, here's the type, here's the parameter name, and a message, and that's all you got to do. It throws the proper exception for you, okay? So you can check that out. It works in Framework, and I wrote the same exact version in .NET Core. You can check it out. So data includes databases, files, all kinds of other things. Data is super important, of course, to any app. Any app needs data. If you've used your phone at this event, you can see how bad it is on this crappy cell phone connection here. Most of the apps don't even work because they can't get the data through, because they weren't caching anything, which I'll talk about in a second. So recently, sorry, I'm going the wrong way. Recently, I found this cool app by a fellow MVP, and it's called Database Health. And I definitely recommend going and checking it out. It's free, and it's really cool because you hook it up to an instance of SQL Server, and I think it only works with SQL Server. And you hook it up to an instance, and it shows you all kinds of really cool things like weights and caching and CPUs and connections and all that stuff on one screen. It's really cool. Now, database administrators probably need something better, but me being a developer who will never claim he's a great database person, this is great. Okay, so check it out. Memory and network, release objects as soon as possible. I beat this into my students' heads all the time. As soon as you're done with something, release it, okay? And how do you release it? By calling dispose on iDisposable objects. That's what I've been doing all week at this new company, is just fixing their dispose issues, okay? So whenever you're done with any type and you're not sure that it implements iDisposable, do .d and see if it's there. See if dispose is there. If it is, use the using statement, okay? Because at the end of the using statement, it properly closes the connection or whatever and releases it from memory, okay? You need to release things as soon as possible from memory, especially on back-end servers. So it's the current contract I just ended. When I first got their source code, I analyzed it, and I went back to the manager, and my first meeting after I saw the code, I went to the manager, and the first thing I said to him when I walked in the door was, hey, do you have any servers, back-end servers, that you just have to reboot every once in a while? You don't know why? He goes, yes. I go, I know exactly why. And it took me 3 months to fix it, literally. So if you do this while you're coding in the first place, you won't have these issues, okay? And everything I talk about is you should be doing this while you're coding in the first place, not after. Because if you do it after, it's going to be really expensive or it will never happen. And this is where you get the chewing gum and duct tape and in code. And you just create a big pile of spaghetti. That's not the word I wanted to use, but that's the word I used in public. So security, of course, identity, SQL injection. One of the things I like about any framework is it prevents any SQL injection for you, so you don't really have to worry about it. But if you are doing SQL, hopefully not inline SQL, really be careful and please know what you're doing so you don't get SQL injection attacks. Cross-site scripting, of course, with websites is very important. And you know, the one thing I've always liked with .NET is type checking. .NET is inherently, the types in .NET are inherently secure because of the way .NET works, okay? And why I don't like JavaScript, okay? Repeal and replace JavaScript. That's actually not my quote. That's a quote from the architect of C#. So, reuse. I talk about this a lot, okay? 90% of all your code should be in DLLs. That's what I've been saying for the last year and a half, okay? Because everybody says, how much should I put in DLLs? At least 90, if not more, okay? Why? Because I can almost guarantee you someday in the future that code is going to be reused by some other app. Hence why you need to do DLLs, and hence why you need to do the architecture I showed you, okay? Because if you write and this happened to me once. Boss came up and said, Dave, we need you to write this blah, blah, blah website. And I said, will it always be a website? He said, yes. I go, okay. So I wrote everything in the website. And then later he came up to me, Dave, we have to support the iPhone. Well, we're screwed. Because now I have to rip everything out and do it the way it should have been done. Okay? So just do it the way you should have done it in the first place. Okay? So 90% should be in DLLs. I have a brand new .NET standard libraries that I'm working. Actually, you can see some of it. I need to do a push to get the new stuff up there. But I'm changing all my open source projects to .NET standard libraries. And if you came to my talk yesterday, I talked more about .NET Core and standard. Or in the framework, you can use portable libraries. And I wouldn't really recommend it, but you can do .NET Core libraries. I would try to stick to standard because standard will work on any platform, whereas core might not work exactly the same, okay? So reuse. Just code as if always code that whatever you're writing is going to be reused, okay? The only thing in the UI, user experience layer, should be just enough to deal with those freaking user clicks, okay? That's it. Everything else should be in DLLs, okay? Type coupling. I don't know if I mentioned it on the other slide, but that code analytics I was showing you had one class that had a cyclomatic complexity of 7,290. So who can explain, sorry, it's a repeat, and you can't answer this, who can explain what cyclomatic complexity is? No one? You're all developers, right? Not exactly, sort of, yes. Anybody else? It's cyclomatic complexity is calculated based on the number of paths that the code can take in a method. So if you have a method with 3 parameters and you have a bunch of if statements, the cyclomatic complexity is the calculation of how many different paths the code can take in your method, okay? That's cyclomatic complexity. And the official definition, if you use a product like a ReSharper or CodeRush like I do, it tells you constantly what your cyclomatic complexity is, okay? And I looked it up once, and some smart guy said it should be 25 or under, okay? That number should be 25 or under. I strive for being that number in the teens, okay? I try never to do over 20, okay? The reason is, the other thing that number means, which I think is actually kind of more important, is that number really means the minimum number of unit tests you need to write for that type. Minimum. And that's just a test encapsulation, okay, which is I told you about earlier, okay? That's just a test encapsulation, and you can write your business logic on top of it, but you need 7,290 unit tests for that one type. Do you think they had 7,290 unit tests? No, they only had 1,800, which took an hour to run, and not one of them tested encapsulation. Not one. I looked at them. So that's what that number means, okay? So if you can keep that number low, not only do you can write less unit tests, but it makes your code more reusable, okay? And a lot of times I get into discussion, people say, well, how much code is too much for a method? And I've always said, if someone asks me that, if it goes off the bottom of your screen, it's too much, okay? I know we have big-ass monitors now. That's why my font is 16 point. Not only because of that, because I'm getting older too. But, but if it's going off the bottom of your screen, it's too big, okay? So use refactoring, not the refactoring in Visual Studio. Use refactoring tools from CodeRush or ReSharper, okay? They will save you a ton of time refactoring and for reuse, okay? They're worth their weight in gold. Complexity. Of course, you want to really keep your complexity low. And I know that sounds weird for code. Isn't code complex? Yeah. it can be, but generally it shouldn't be, okay? Especially nowadays with, NuGet and all these packages you can just download and use. So, with complexity, what I always do is I write code that most programmers can understand. So when I'm writing code, I'm writing it that hopefully even a beginner would understand it, okay? Yeah, if they are in my team and they need to come over and I need to maybe explain a link query or something, that's fine. But I don't need to do a lot, right? I don't want to be, part of my job was mentoring, but I got to work too, right? So if I can write code that's easily understandable, especially as a contractor, because I'm going to go someday, right? Like the project I did for this medical department at UCSD, I dumbed down the code. I did, because the people that were going to left to maintain it weren't even programmers. I think the one girl there was going to school. So as soon as I found that out, I started dumbing down the code. It worked just the same, just as fast, but I didn't use crazy link queries and stuff like that she wouldn't understand at first, okay? So when I'm a contractor, I try to base the simplicity of it on the people that's going to be left to maintain it. So Martin Fowler, most of you know, have heard of him, says any fool can write code that computer can understand. Good programmers write code that humans can understand. Yes, I thank you, Martin. Because I can say it all day long, but you'll believe him more. Because he's more famous than me. So refactor, talked about that already. And unit testable. If you can't unit test your code, go back to the drawing board, okay? Every bit of code should be unit testable, okay, in your DLLs, okay? Every bit of code. If it isn't, refactor, okay? Performance, of course, chunky, not chatty. The biggest speed problem you will ever have is the freaking internet, okay? You can optimize on the back end and the client as much as you want, but if you don't solve the internet issue, it's worthless, okay? The biggest chunk of the time will be going through that freaking internet. Yes, the internet's great, but it's also not the fastest thing in the world, right? So don't ever go across the wire unless you have to, okay? Even internally, chunk stuff up and then send it. Okay, this whole API system I wrote for a company recently was all based on that. I forced our partners to do that because it not only made their speed better, but saved speed on our backend servers. Queuing. Queuing on the client end is really important. You should write all your apps as if the internet's not working, okay? If the internet's not working, like here, right? Your user should be able to do something. I should be able to send a tweet while I'm in the airplane. I should be able to send emails while I'm in the airplane. I should be able to do a Facebook post while I'm in the airplane, right? And most all those things, when I first started talking about this, didn't work. Facebook didn't work that way. Twitter didn't work that way, but they do now, thanks to me. Because I tweeted them. So you need to do, and I have a whole nother talk based on this, you need to write your apps, and not web apps, but mobile apps and stuff like that, as what I call occasionally connected, okay? I've never seen anybody write an app like this except for me at one company, okay? You should always do it as if the internet's not working, and they should be able to get something done. Yes, they won't be able to update a list or something like that. I hope they know that because they're in an airplane, me, but they should be able to do something. Minimal amount of work, okay? Microsoft used to have a really good framework for that, but they killed it. So I think now it's Azure Mobile Services, which I still need to look into some more. So queuing, caching, and the cloud, of course. You know, if you're not looking at the cloud, you better be, because everything is moving there, okay? And not only is it a huge cost savings for companies, but it's a big performance increase for your users. Because if you're on something like Azure, if your user goes to an API or something like that, you know, Azure will direct them to the closest data center that you have everything replicated in, right? So if they're back east, they go to, I don't know where they go back east. Out here, I think it's in Denver or someplace. And so their performance gets better, okay, because you're using the cloud. So if you're not using it, you should be looking into it. And there were a bunch of Azure MVPs, well, a few MVPs here today. So globalization is another big one. Sorry, I'm going to have to speed up a little bit. If you don't write code that can be multi-language while you're writing it, it's going to be really expensive to do it later. You have to hire me for many tens of thousands of dollars to do it for you. I've done it, okay? Because I can almost guarantee you your program's going to be needed in a different language someday. So if you do just a simple coding while you're coding, then when they say, hey, we need to support French Canadian, you can say, okay, we can, because I did it right in the first place. But fixing it later is hugely expensive, okay? The last project I was on, the last time I talked to the manager, I think his cost was up to 40 grand for a very simple 2 programs, okay? And I think that part of that 40 grand includes the translation too. And not Google Translate. Sorry, it doesn't work. You have to hire a human. Error and exception handling, I talked more about this yesterday. All your code should be in try catches, because all code can break. I don't care what it is, it can break. Everything needs to be wrapped around try catches, because you don't want to get the .NET death screen or whatever it's called, okay? And you don't want to tick off your users. So use try catch, use global trapping, all .NET frameworks except for console apps can do this. And usually the first thing I do when I go into the company is have to do this, because I never see companies do this, okay? Because the global exception handling is the last ditch effort to not only save the program, but to log what the heck happened, okay? So I showed him yesterday how to do it in .NET Core, but if you're using framework, it's a lot easier, so you should do it. Log, everything. Every exception, events you care about, things like that, and log to multiple places. I'm very anal about that. At one company, I was logging on the back end to 3 different places, because I did not want to lose anything. And we were logging on 20,000 customers, so. And that logging system is in my open source project. And what I've been doing, and in the app you're using right now, I'm actually using a framework from a company called Stackify. So now all my logs go to Stackify, which is in the web. It's on the web, so I can see instantly what's going on with my app by just going to Stackify. You know, I don't have to write an app to look at the logs. I don't do anything like that. Stackify does it for you. And they do a lot for free. And I think the enterprise version is like $20 a month or something, okay? Sorry, I'm like out of time. Analysis, I never see people do analysis. I'd already talked about unit testing, so I'll kind of blow through that. Sorry, I tried. Documentation, use GoStock from Submain. Refactor, so I use CodeRush from DevExpress. Ray Sharper is one of the sponsors here. Use one of them, okay? Don't use Visual Studio. I can't show you the, oh, I use Code It Right too for analytics. That'll be in the later. I use memory profiling before I consider a feature done, because the only way to find the last bit of memory issues is to profile it while it's running. The code analyzers can't find everything, okay? You have to do this, and this is the product I use. All right. I can't do that, sorry. That's it. Thank you. See you next year. Oh, since I'm an MVP, I have some raffle cards up here that you fill it. So I think you rate my thing and put it in the fishbowl out there, and you can win a Bose speakers, okay? And I got some Microsoft stickers up here, too.